Okay, so should we get started? So let's do it. So our MC who usually does this is not here. He's online, and his name is Jonathan. So I'm just going to do the big intro, and then I'll hand over to Jonathan, who will do the in the news, like what's news. Yeah, Jonathan, I assume you're putting your camera on. I'm not sure. But anyway, welcome. Thanks for physically being here, those that are here, and to those that are online. My name is Michael. So just a disclaimer, I am a Microsoft employee. That's why I have Microsoft on my shirt. So yeah, but anyway, welcome. Thanks for joining. Jonathan will do in the news. He'll then do the agenda of kind of like what we're covering. I'll be back up a little bit later because I'm going to do some Copilot Studio specific stuff. But let me mute myself now and let Jono do his thing.
Perfect. Thanks, Michael. Good evening, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. Don't know what the weather's like there, but we've had quite a storm over here already. Just for everyone to know, these sessions are being recorded. We do upload them to our YouTube channel, so you can catch up on them if you do miss out. Tonight, we're going to be covering just some new items coming into the platform. Michael's then going to take us through Copilot Studio, some of the new things inside there. I will then take you through building an autonomous agent. So the first autonomous agent that you're going to build, just some tips and tricks around that. Then we've got Tinas doing the tech tip, deploying SharePoint Power Apps to multiple sites. And then we'll finish off with a community discussion around chat experiences. Let's just jump into the news. Michael, I can't see my Teams window at the moment, so if there are any questions or hands, just let me know, please. So, first off, I'm sure that some of you have already seen there is a new modernized create page in Power Apps. We're starting to see this flow through more and more of the tools. I've seen some of the pages you can still switch on and off the new experiences as well. We've also made advancements on pasting images and files to quickly fill in forms. So instead of you having to copy and paste and move things around, you can now just copy a page in, drop it in, AI then reads the page and then fills out the necessary information on the form. So this is quite cool. They've also extended support. So they now support text files, CSVs, doc files, PDF, or any images as well. So this way it can go through that, upload, and start filling the form out for you, making it much easier to complete forms with the AI data entry. We also previously announced and spoke about the Plan Designer in Power Platform. Now, there's been some major improvements on the user experience on this. In the past, when you were editing user roles and user stories in Planner, you had to do this through a generative AI prompt. And what it would do is it would completely regenerate the entire section. This can be frustrating if you're trying to get something right. Now you can at least go in and inline make changes to the user stories as well as their roles inside there. Another one that's quite exciting is managed availability. Now, essentially what this does is it gives you high availability and DR in your solutions in Power Platform. So if we have, this is going to leverage off of the availability zones in the platform. So if one zone or essentially one data center goes down, this is supported by multiple data centers, so your solution will just keep running. We'll give you near zero downtime for these availability zones. So that way you can make sure that those enterprise applications that you're building are highly resilient and are protected to make sure that you can meet your requirements. Now, there is also a self-serve disaster recovery, backup, and DR inside of the platform as well. So you can go in, set your attention periods on certain things so you are able to recover from any types of failures that you may have. Just a note, from what I've seen, this is only available for managed environments. Okay, so it makes sense for the managed availability. I mean, we want to bring in high availability and redundancy for these environments. So this way, you can make sure you've got that added layer of protection. It is going to be region specific, so we're going to need to have availability zones in those regions. I think most of our centers have got availability zones, so that's at least a good sign. We're busy waiting for this to start rolling out. But you'll see once this is enabled and activated on your side, you'll be able to go into your Power Platform Admin Center and you'll get access to all the features, the retention policies, and everything else. Another one that we've announced recently. Oh, wait, I've jumped too far there. No, where are you? This way. There we go. So there is a Power Platform solution assessment. And what this does, it gives you the ability to review your solutions that you're building. I mean, this covers every aspect of the solution, from the functionality and user experience to its alignment with the overall business goals. Now, this assessment also provides actionable insights and recommendations to help improve it. So it really makes it possible for users to make informed decisions that help improve the solutions end to end. So this is also nice to see. We've also seen a couple of updates to Power Automate Desktop. Now, test cases have been introduced into the platform, so you can start testing your flows with a test module. So this way you can make sure that things are working effectively, debug it, make sure that everything is fixed before launching it out. There's also a new action for SAP, the Select SAP Navigation item. So this way it just makes it easy for those integrations that you are doing with SAP. And then lastly, Azure Key Vault credentials are now supported out of the box. It was a bit of a workaround to get the credentials working previously with Azure Key Vault. Now it is built in. This is currently in preview. And the last one on my list, I think, yes, Process Map in Power Automate is now available. So this is in the Automation Center, and it will give you that end-to-end automation monitoring and management. So this way you can at least get a full view of your process at scale, so you can make the decisions to improve it along the way. So with that, I just want to open up the floor and see if anyone picked up any other things in the news that they just wanted to mention or talk about.
Hello?
Hello?
I don't know how new this is, but I just realized it the other day. So in a Power App, when you want to move the Z index of the item to move it up or down, you can just actually drag it now. You don't have to go click up like you have to do before.
Okay, oh, that's cool.
And Jonathan, just that solution assessment, is that the one that also is doing a code review now?
Yes, yeah, it is.
So it'll like evaluate your Power FX and then give you some
Absolutely.
suggestions if you're doing
on how you can improve it, streamline it,
Yeah.
and everything else, which is quite cool to see.
Okay, cool.
Perfect.
Anything else? Anyone online? No? No? Hold on, there's a chat window. Thanks, Karika.
Hey, Karika. Perfect, Mike. I'm going to hand over to you to take us through Copilot Studio updates.
Okay, cool. So in theory, I could that. Definitely don't want to see that. And sorry, it takes me a while. I feel like my dad. I'm even wearing my glasses like my dad as well. Okay. So everyone online, can you see my desktop?
Yes.
Okay, cool, awesome. So I'm going to do an update of like what's new in Copilot Studio. Well, I'm actually not. I'm going to do some of what's new, and then Jonathan's going to do autonomous agents, which is like the really big what's new. But I guess the question is, what's new from when? You know, from like a year ago or from last week? And I don't know where everyone's at. So I'm kind of doing what I think, you know, is new that you might not know. But I'll also do just a little bit of ground setting as well, just in case you've never seen Copilot Studio before or you don't know much about it. I guess there's a few key things that I'll just kind of level set, and then take you through a few funky, cool new features in Copilot Studio. And let me start. I have no slides, and that's just because I'm lazy. So let's just start here. So what this is that you see here, this is called Microsoft Copilot Chat. Okay, Copilot Chat you can get to by going to m365copilot.com, m365copilot.com, or you will find it on your waffle menu in Office 365 there. And any user that's got an Office 365 license can access this. You don't know, this is right now. It's an entitlement of Office 365 to get to the screen. You don't need a special license to get here other than that. And in fact, my demo tenant here, I have no Microsoft 365 Copilot license. So if you've heard of Microsoft 365 Copilot, I don't have one of those licenses in my tenant at all. And so I can get here, but you'll see the work little toggle has got a lock on it, which means I can't get to that. But I can get to the web toggle. And essentially what this means is I've got a GPT-4o powered chat that allows me to ask stuff, summarize stuff, review documents, etc. But the work tab means that I can't, for example, here ask it to look in my diary or look in my OneDrive, my Teams meetings, etc. But I can ask it to, look at a specific company's recent financials and summarize them, or generate me some type of report, or ask it to create me some code, or whatever it might be. And this is basically free. This is included in Office 365. And so what you'll see here is some starter prompts. These are called starter prompts. And off I go. And I can even upload files here. If I do upload a file here and ask it to do something with that file, maybe it's a CV or whatever it is, and I ask questions of the CV, that file will go into my OneDrive for Business. Okay, just as a side note there. Pretty cool. Okay. So that's not actually about Copilot Studio at all. But this is on the right-hand side, and this is the concept of agents. And so the idea is you will have conversational agents, and you'll have autonomous agents. I'll focus on conversational agents. So a conversational agent is, in the old days, like last week, we would call them a chatbot. But it's an agent. And there's lots of reasons why it's called an agent and not a chatbot. But I'm going to have a conversation with it. And typically an agent is going to be maybe not so broad in focus. It's going to be quite niche in what it does. So for example, you can imagine I've got conversational agents inside of my organization. One for me to maybe ask questions of HR. So maybe I've got an agent called Ask HR. And I can ask it how many leave days I've got, what the paternity or maternity policy is. Maybe I can take leave through that agent, but I can have a conversation with this thing that might answer questions. It might reach into databases and give me stuff, or write into databases and APIs and stuff like this. So you can see here on the right-hand side, I've got a whole bunch of agents. I've got one that generates me jokes. Probably not a really good agent from a work context, but I liked it. I've got a legal advisor agent, and what this one does is it looks at our SharePoint site that's got all information from our legal team, allowed what I am and what I'm not allowed to do when it comes to social media. This is fake, by the way. This is a demo tenant, so it's just an example of one, and it really does work. But for example, I might say to it, hey, I'm planning on writing this LinkedIn post. Can I write it like this? And then it will look at the SharePoint site that the legal team maintains, look at all the rules there, and come back and say, no, you can't say that, you need to reword it like this. That's just an example of an agent. I might have an IT support desk agent where I ask questions, well, how do I uninstall this software? Or I've got this error and I'd like to create a ticket, etc. So you can imagine all these types of agents. Make sense? And many agents will come with the platform, but you will also build agents. And in fact, every single person in the company can build their own agent very, very simply. Okay, so you'll see here, there's this thing here called create an agent. So if I click this, you'll see this is Copilot Studio. This is almost like Copilot Studio Lite. It's called Agent Builder. And this will help me create an agent. It's even got some examples of like a career coach, a prompt coach, a writing coach. But I can actually use, it gives me an agent to build an agent. So what it's asking here is like, describe what I want the agent to do. So I could say, I would like you to help me write LinkedIn posts as an example. And then it'll continue to iterate. And then it'll say, do you want me to point to any internet site data to ground this thing on? Do you want me to point to any SharePoint data to ground this thing on? So in fact, that legal one that I spoke about earlier on was built this way. And then I just pointed it to a SharePoint site. So this is called Agent Builder. I'm not going to go through all the details of how it works. I'm sure you can find some good information on it. And then once it's created, it will appear here. So for example, my legal advisor agent is one that I built. You see it loads. It's got some starter prompts that I asked it to have. And then I can go and interact with this agent. Makes sense so far? Any questions? Why not? Okay. So we haven't touched full-blown Copilot Studio yet. So let's talk a little bit about that. Maybe this, create an agent is a little too basic and I want to have more control. And I want to create a much more powerful agent that can do more things. So that's when we jump into Copilot Studio. So let's just go to the home of Copilot Studio. And like we certainly don't have enough time to go through everything in Copilot Studio, but from here I can build an agent. And I can publish it to that Copilot chat experience. But I can also publish it other places as well. I could publish it into Teams. I could publish it potentially onto Facebook as Facebook chat. I could publish it to a telephone and I can phone it and speak to it. So there's different channels I can publish it to. But really for internal agents, the idea going forward is that we will generally put them into Copilot chat. The one place where all employees can find agents. And so you could go here and you can say, cool, I want a new agent. And it does give you some nice templates of different agents that you could choose from to help you, especially if like common scenarios like IT support desk scenarios. Like there's actually 3 templates for this. They all actually integrate with ServiceNow, which is quite interesting. But you can then create it and then just take out the ServiceNow connection and connect it to something else. If you so wish. Or you just click new agent and you create a blank one and you build it yourself. So I had previously, if I just look at some of the agents I've built, I've got one here called my PA agent, which is my personal assistant. And so I created this one from blank and then I, gave it some skills, if you want to call it that. And so I'll just go through a couple of basic things and then I'll show you like what's new. So when you create an agent, you've got this option of giving it knowledge, giving it access to content. So when people ask questions or ask it to do stuff, it can look in these repositories in order to answer. So when you give it knowledge, you'll see there's different data sources that I can choose from, such as I can point it to websites, I can point it to SharePoint, Dataverse, Azure SQL, etc. So for example, what I did previously is I just went in here and I pointed it to a SharePoint site, which is a knowledge base, which has our HR policies on. And so now I can go and ask a question, and this is always the best when you've got one hand to use. How many leave days can I take each year? Now, in this knowledge content, now I might have not lots of knowledge there. I might be pointing to multiple SharePoint sites, multiple websites, multiple Dataverse tables, SQL tables, etc. And what it's going to go and do is it's going to figure out, okay, which knowledge repositories are likely to answer this question. And because this is called the HR knowledge base, it knows, oh, I should go and use this. And then it looks in there and it answers the question, and it got the answer out of the leave policy document that's in that SharePoint site, which is pretty cool. This has always been here. This has been here for some time. So just a few interesting things that are new in this space. So the one new thing is when I go to knowledge add knowledge, and I go to advanced, we actually just announced yesterday that we will support Snowflake as well. So there's this nice little video here where they show how you can connect to Snowflake. And so then you can ask data-oriented questions out of data that's sitting in Snowflake. What's the total sum of our sales last month? Under the hood, it's doing some clever stuff. It's generating SQL select statements, essentially doing the work, but then producing it and giving it back to you in natural language. So that's really cool and new. So if you do have Snowflake, that's something that you want to look at. Azure SQL's already there. There's a few that aren't available yet, but will become available very soon, like Microsoft Fabric as well. So if you have Fabric data, and in Fabric, you've got something called a data agent. So I can connect to that and the same scenario. So if I'm not using Snowflake, maybe I've got Fabric, and I want to ask those same type of questions, I can do so by pointing to Fabric, which is pretty cool. Yes. So there isn't SAP as knowledge, but we've got SAP connectors for actions. So for example, knowledge is typically stuff like almost like a fuzzy type of search behind the scene, like a Q&A kind of scenario, whereas actions are much more targeted. I'll get to them now, but in that context, we can use actions as an example to say, show me my open purchase orders, or I would like to create a requisition, or what are the invoices that haven't been approved? So those types of things I wouldn't actually add as knowledge. I'd add those as actions, and then we've got SAP connectors for that. Okay, so there's a few other little interesting things that are new. For those of you that we're familiar with this, this is all good. So one of the settings that we introduced recently is this, this thing here called enhanced search results. If I enable this, when I'm using SharePoint as a knowledge repository, it's going to use a different index under the hood to answer my questions or get results. It's actually going to use an index that comes with the Microsoft 365 Copilot license. And I closed the page, but I'll just talk to it anyway. Sorry, let's just get back here. When you've got so many tabs open, you forget what you're doing. So what it's going to do is it's going to use an index under the hood called the Microsoft 365 Semantic Index, which is a semantic / vector-based index, which is created for organizations who have at least one Microsoft 365 Copilot license. So as long as the organization has one Microsoft 365 Copilot license, under the hood there's this other index, which is far superior to actually the SharePoint search, which it uses by default to answer your questions. So bottom line is, if you're using SharePoint, I would recommend turning this on and testing the results of what you get back for documents and content that's sitting in SharePoint. You should get significantly better results versus when this thing is off. Okay, so that's the one new thing. The other thing that's quite interesting, which is new as well, I think we announced this last week, is using deep reasoning models. So if I turn this on, what it's going to do is going to allow me to use a GPT-01 model for it to determine what it should do and the outcomes it should perform. And I'm not going into all the details of deep reasoning, but what's cool is if I switch that on, I can start using it. And so you'll see here, in my agent, I've got instructions. So these instructions tell the agent how to behave. You don't necessarily have to have instructions. You can have none. And as long as I've got knowledge, I can answer questions. But maybe, for example, I wanted to do special stuff, like the way it should answer should be different, in a specific tone or a specific format. Or I want to instruct it, like here, this is quite interesting. I've told it what the current date is. I said the current date is this. And I'm going to show you how you use this a little later on when I do some interesting stuff. But this is the instructions. And so with deep reasoning, you can start adding instructions in here to use deep reasoning for specific scenarios. Okay, deep reasoning, very good at like mathematical calculations and these types of things. Yeah, yeah. And you like these instructions will become more clear when Jonathan does his gig, because an autonomous agent is instructions. So it's all about the instructions in terms of telling it what to do, when to do, and how to do it. But you can imagine a scenario where maybe someone asks a question like, I've got a home loan of X, I still need to repay Y. What happens if I increase my monthly payments by Z? You know, like you want it to give you a really good answer. It needs to think through it before it spits out the answer. So that is a good reasoning scenario. So in here I can say, when people ask about home loans and calculations, use deep reasoning. And then it'll use that O1 model to do that. So that's another thing that's quite new. Okay, so let's just quickly talk about actions. So a lot of this isn't new, but it's just cool, and you might not know it. So what I'm going to do here is I've just given my agent, so it has knowledge, but I also wanted to take action. I wanted to create a service ticket or get service tickets or look up a PO or whatever it might be. And I want to give it access to APIs. So what I can do here is click add an action, and then I can give it, you know, the definition of an API. In other words, a Power Platform connector, or just the definition of a RESTful API. And so what I've previously done is I went here and I clicked add action, and I went and found some Power Platform connectors that I thought were quite interesting. And there's thousands of these things, right? So I went and added one for getting the forecast, so it's a weather connector, getting contacts out of my mailbox, getting my meetings out of my mailbox, sending an email. So like send an email, when I added this action, all I did is I found the send email action and I clicked add. And then the important thing is just to describe what this thing does. So you describe here, you say, yeah, this operation sends an email message, just in human language. What does this thing do? And why do you describe it? You describe it so the agent knows when it should call this action versus when it should call the get the weather action. Because someone asks in the agent, what's the weather tomorrow? Then it goes, oh, I've got an action for that. I'll call it. If someone says send an email from here, it knows to do this. Make sense? So there's a description of what it does. That's super important. And then a lot of actions have input parameters, just like an API might have an input and an output. So for example, something like getting the forecast for today, the input would be the location. Okay, so if I did do something like that, let's just test it out. Get me the weather. So what it should do now by itself, it's basically generating a plan. And it's going, oh, I've got an action for that. Let me call it. But can you see it doesn't have a location? I didn't specify where I want it from. So it's asking me now, okay, well, what location? So let's do, I did take a word that's long to type. Hey, I should have just said Durban. Johannesburg. And so what it should do is fill that in. There you go. It calls the API. And what comes back from the API, by the way, is this massive JSON structure, which is essentially this stuff here. So there's lots of information in here that comes back from that API, but it gives it to me in natural language. The weather forecast for Johannesburg, South Africa is as follows. And then I can ask other questions. What time is sunset? And off I go and I have this conversation, but I've never taught it how to have a conversation. All I've done is I've given it access to an action or an API. Makes sense? Okay, so this has been there for a while. But I can also do some interesting stuff. So I've got these actions. I've got one that gets contacts and one that sends an email. So it can chain them together. So it can take out from one, the output from one, and use it as input for the other. So for example, I can do something like this. Send, yeah, well, like send an email to Jagger saying I will be late for the meeting, typing with one hand. That's fine. So what should happen here is it should go, well, I don't have an email address for Jagger, but I've got this tool that gets contacts. So I'll call that, and then I'll get Jagger's email address, and then I'll take the output from that and use it as input for sending an email. So you can see what it did is it first did get contacts, then it got Jagger's email address out of my contact address list, and then it sent Jagger an email. And it says here the email has been sent, and I don't believe it. So if I go to sent, there, it just sent it. Mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. And it can do this not just with actions, so you can actually tell it, you can ask stuff and it might get the input out of knowledge. So what I can actually do, this is quite a cool thing, you can upload like a little HTML file, which is your template for your email, and add that as knowledge. Then in your instructions, so your instructions, you go and say, whenever sending an email, use that file as the template for the email. It'll read the file out of knowledge, it'll use that as the template for the email, and then that's the template it'll always use to when it sends. So there's a good example of when to use an instruction. I'm instructing it, it must behave like that. Pretty cool, eh? Very, very, very nice. Very freaky, but very nice. Don't ask me licensing questions. Don't ask me licensing questions. Okay, so that's, you can see here I'm calling what they call Power Platform connectors or actions directly, or a REST API. But what you can also do from here, which I do regularly, is I want a little bit of like more logic around that API. So what I actually do is I call a flow. So for example, I've got a flow here that calls, in quotes, my service ticket system, whatever it might be. And so in this Power Automate flow, I'm going to do a whole bunch of steps. It's not just one step. You know, I'm going to get the data back from that database. I might reformat it, and then I'll return it. So when I click add an action, I can actually choose a flow. And I've got like emails. I didn't use this one here to get all my mails from my mailbox because that's just way too many. So I created a flow that limits the amount of mails that it returns with some input parameters and stuff like that. So I'm just kind of adding more logic into that action. And so if I look at something like get service tickets, come along. Same thing, I describe what it does. So if I ask it now, show me my open support tickets, show me my closed support tickets, or whatever it might be, it's going to call this, and it's actually going to call this Power Automate flow under the hood. So if I click on this thing, it'll show me that flow and what it looks like, which will have an input and an output with some steps in between. My steps are very simple because I'm faking it all in this specific example. So let's just show you. Okay, so there's an input and an output, and in the middle we'll go and do all our work. But I just have one step here that just fakes it all with this like tickets that I got back from the database. Anyway, this will work. I'm not going to show it to you. But there is an interesting new thing here. We've also, once again, been able to do this for a long time. You can go and create a Power Automate flow, and then from your agent, you can come click actions. You can add an action, and then you can say, okay, just show me my flows. And you'll see I've got a whole bunch I've done before. I've got ones that send SMSs, get service tickets from ServiceNow, whatever it might be. So I've got a whole bunch. Cool, that's been there for a while. But what would have just appeared in most of your user interfaces for Copilot Studio within the last week is this thing on the left-hand side called flows. We call these agent flows. Agent flows. And just think of them at the moment, think of them as a Power Automate flow. But they're much more tightly coupled with your agent. And so I don't have to go to Power Automate first to create my flow. I can do it from here. So I can come in here, click Start in Designer, and I can build out my agent flow, my logic in here. And then it's associated to my agent. There's another very interesting thing here in that the way Copilot Studio is licensed or built is based on this concept of messages. So everything is a message. Okay, so the currency is messages, how many messages it responds with, or how many messages it uses to create a response. Agent flows will work the same way. So if I go and create an agent flow here and I put actions in here, I won't license it like I traditionally license Power Automate. It will just consume messages. Okay. So actually, I have no messages in my environment. So I actually can't even demonstrate this because it tells me I've got no messages. So I have no messages assigned in my environment, so I can't do this. But that's how it works. So if you see something called agent flows, which was announced last week, you see it in the UI, that's what it is. Okay, is there anything else I want to specifically show you here? There is one more thing. Two more things. This is new. You may not have seen this before, but in your agent, you can now add starter prompts. So those are those starter prompts that you would then see here. So that's quite cool. In the past, what we'd do is we'd create like adaptive cards and render them that way. These starter prompts only appear in Copilot chats. They wouldn't appear, for example, in Teams. So yeah, anyway. So that's that. Yeah, common prompts. It's not far off. Okay, one last thing, and then I'm going to head over to Jonathan. Where am I? I want to highlight this GitHub repo. It's called the Copilot Studio Kit. So you can just, search for it, Copilot Studio Kit, or take down that URL. And basically what this is this is a team at Microsoft who's very much focused on deploying agents for our biggest and largest enterprise customers. And they come up with very interesting scenarios. And then they take those and they create like best practices, and they create like little widgets and stuff that may help you in your projects. And this one is really awesome, this Copilot Studio Kit. So what it allows you to do is it allows you to test your agents, okay, which is super useful. And a whole bunch of other things. So for example, it's got this other one here, which is like adaptive cards. If you've ever tried to create adaptive cards for agents, they've got some good examples in here. They've got another tool underneath here where what you can do is you can take files from SharePoint and upload them into your agent as agent files. I'm not going to go into the details of what that all means and why you would do that, but there is a reason behind doing that. They've got this little web chat playground where you can test some API testing tools. So anyway, but I'd definitely go and recommend having a look at this. If anything, for those of you that build Power Apps, it's actually quite a cool Power App. Like they do some interesting stuff in this Power App. Like this screen here is a canvas page inside of a model-driven Power App, and I just think it looks cool. So if you're building model-driven apps, maybe go and have a look at how they do this, because this is quite cool for your model-driven apps to have a similar approach. Anyway, so I would highly recommend having a look at this kit. You download this as a solution and then import it into an environment. Yeah. So please go and have a look at this. That SharePoint synchronization is that file synchronization. Yeah, so there's a bunch of cool stuff here. Okay, I'm going to just pause for a few questions, and if there's not any questions, or once I've answered them, I'll hand over to Jonathan. Online quiet. Oh, sorry. So I keep saying one last thing. Sorry. I never showed you how you actually publish this agent to Copilot Chat. So when you go to channels, so you've built this agent in Copilot Studio. Remember I said you can publish it to multiple channels, but what's new is this used to say Teams. Now it says Teams plus Microsoft 365. So when you publish it here, you can choose that you want it published to Copilot Chat. There we go. Make agent available in Microsoft 365 Copilot chat. If I tick that, it means it can show up here. You may still have an approval process, like from an enterprise perspective, where someone goes in and actually approves it before it shows up here, or before it shows up when you click Get Agents. You'll see something here called Built for Your Org. You see I've got Agent Smith. Everyone needs an Agent Smith. And I've got my leave management. So these were built in Copilot Studio, published, approved, and now I can use them. Okay, so there's a little bit more detail of where do you go to approve it. If you search the web, you'll find it. Okay. Happy days. And I'm going to stop now and hand over to Jonathan. Oh, and one question. So the question is, if you've got guests in Teams, can they access it? I don't think they can access Copilot chat. They may be able to access the actual agent if you publish it to Teams as a Teams bot. My honest answer is I don't know. I don't know if anybody else knows. But you certainly can publish it, on a public website. Get a little chat widget. You can put it anywhere. You can publish it to WhatsApp. WhatsApp is actually being released as preview pretty soon. So if you look at our Wave 2 release notes, so you can choose WhatsApp natively from Microsoft. You've actually been able to use WhatsApp for a while, just not through Microsoft as the provider. So you'll be able to do it through Microsoft. So yeah. Sorry, that's a long answer, not to your question, but anyway. So I'm going to pause now and hand over to Jonathan.
Thanks for that, Michael. Can you see my screen in the room all right? Perfect. Okay, great. So I set a challenge for myself this evening. I want to see how quickly I can build an autonomous agent. So Mike, some of the demos you did help cover some of the background for some of the things I'm going to be doing. So I appreciate that. We're going to be starting off with Copilot Studio for this. Michael showed you earlier how you could build it through the agent builder in Copilot Chat. We're going to be jumping straight into Copilot Studio to put this together. Now, the idea behind autonomous agents, so just for some background, most of the time when you're interacting with an agent, you're interacting through a chat interface. So you're sending it a message, you're asking it questions, you're sending it a file, and then it goes and performs whatever action you've instructed it to. The idea with autonomous agents, however, is it should be able to act without actual interactions with a chat window. So this is very similar to how Power Automate runs. So if you look at Power Automate kicks off and runs based on a trigger. Similar concept to how you're going to be utilizing agents. And we really see this transforming the way we do workflows in the future. So the agent that I'm going to be building today is a basic one. It's looking out for emails in my inbox. When an email arrives, it goes and does some research for me and then provides an answer for that. So it's a research assistant that we are going to be building out here. So let's have a look here and quickly dive in. I'm going to go into Create. Michael talked about some of the templates that are available. Definitely check these out. There's really some useful ones inside, but I'm going to go with New Agent. Now, with all of the agents, you can go in and you can start already using natural language to create this. So this can help you get started very quickly. So you're just essentially explaining what you want to get out of this agent. And we'll take you through all the steps of naming it, attaching knowledge sources, all of these things come into play. But I'm going to quickly jump to configure. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a name. So I'm going to call this Email Research Agent. And I'm going to come in and put a short description. So the description is essentially explaining to people who are going to be using it what it should be doing. Okay. This is not the instructions of it. Instructions is where you're actually now doing that system prompt or that master prompt to get the agent to behave a very specific way. But I'm going to come down and I'm going to jump down to knowledge quickly. And actually, wait, let me cancel this out. Let me go in and create here. So we've got the description, we've got the agent name. Those are the basics for us to set this up. Once we've got this up, we can now start bringing in the various components to make this autonomous. The first thing we're going to come here and down here and do, let's just give this a second to load. Knowledge is there. Let's go and add some knowledge here. I'm going to add a public website. So let me add in a couple of websites here. Let's go learn. Let's go Copilot. And one more. Microsoft Teams. So that's everything. Got Copilot Studio. I'm missing one. Copilot Studio, Microsoft Teams, and let's go add. We just set confirm as the owner and we click on add. So the one thing that you want to do whenever you're working with agents is be able to control the output of what it is generating. Okay. The one thing where AI start to hallucinate is when they look inside of their trained knowledge set to answer questions. So we want to avoid this as much as possible. This is why the RAG pattern has been so successful, is because you're telling the agent or the model to only answer based on the information that it is provided with. So for this situation, we want to turn this off. We don't want it to look at its default knowledge to provide an answer in this situation. In some situations you might, but I like to steer clear of it because we know how these AI models have been trained. It's not with always great information. So we're going to keep that off for now. Next, we come down, we see our actions and our triggers. Now, this is what starts to make the agent autonomous. I'm going to click on add trigger. So this is what kicks this off. You can see here, it's asking to turn on generative orchestration to continue. So this is where a generative AI model is going to evaluate the requests coming in and determine what the best action is. So does it redirect to a topic? Does it call an action? So when you want to use these triggers, you want to make sure that this is turned on. Okay. Once this is turned on, you can now start going through all the triggers that have been built out. So fairly similar to what you had when you were in Power Automate. So you can see we can kick this off as a recurrence. So I could say every morning at 8 a.m., send me an email with what is happening on my day today. You can see we can say when a new forms response is submitted, when a new channel or when a new message is added to a channel in Teams. But I'm going to kick this off when a new email arrives in my inbox. And just like in Power Automate, you've got very similar configurations over here. You're going to choose the folder that it is connecting to. Well, first we need to authenticate, so we'll wait for this to go through. Once it's authenticated, we're going to choose the folder, and then we can start setting up any of the filters inside there. When you're doing this and testing this out, make sure you set up concrete filters. You don't necessarily want to action on every single email you have coming into your inbox. It could end up causing a bit of a nightmare. So there we go. I've got my trigger name, and then I've got my authentication to both. We click next. Here we get to the filters. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to filter on my inbox. And I'm going to come down to the subject filter, and I'm going to set this to question demo. Okay, so that only picks up email messages with the subject question demo. Obviously, you can refine this and change this as time goes on, but for now, while we're testing it out, I'm just setting it up with that. And then we go create trigger. Once this is created, the next thing that we wanted to do is we wanted to go and fire off an email. And you'll see why I'm doing this first before I actually go in and set up the instructions, because the instructions are going to reference these two components that we're bringing in. Let's give this a second. There we go. That's in. Now we can come to our actions and what we wanted to do. So the scenario that I'm painting here is an email comes in with some technical questions. Instead of me having to go and do the research, I want it to do the research from those knowledge sources for me and send me an answer back that I can reply to that message on. So just like Michael showed earlier, he used the send an email. I'm going to do the same, send an email, find the right action. So there we go, Office 365 Outlook. When you are working from your work mailbox, just make sure that you are using that one or from a shared mailbox. That's going to be your normal commercial outlook.com email addresses. I'm going to select that first action. Once again, we've got to authenticate just like we do in Power Automate. And then once we've authenticated, we can go through the configuration. Though, as Michael shared earlier, there's not much that we need to go in and change. There is one setting that I want to change inside here, and we'll see that now. Let's just give it a second. There we go. Okay. So you can see, as Michael said, the description is important to make sure that the model understands what action should be called for a specific scenario. So you can see this email operation sends an email message. Now, there's a section here where you can set the authentication. Default is user authentication. However, in this specific scenario, I don't want it to authenticate under the user that is sending the email because that's going to break the situation. I wanted to use the Copilot author authentication. You can see how this does give a warning. I mean, most scenarios, you won't be utilizing Copilot author authentication on connectors because you want to make sure that users who are interacting with it are interacting with data that they've got access to. As soon as you switch it over to the author authentication, it is now going to act underneath the author's context. Meaning if the author's got access to information that the user doesn't, it could inadvertently share out information. That's why we're giving this warning. And you'll see just now when we finish as well, it will give us another warning on it just to confirm and make sure that we're happy with Copilot author. But in most situations, you're going to use user authentication. Next one is the inputs and outputs. So in this case, the inputs that we require for a message to be sent is the to field, so the address, the subject, and the body of the message. You can come in and add additional ones if you want, but that's completely up to you. I'm going to come in and let's add the action. Then once we're done with that, we just need to go and set up our instructions. And this is where I've cheated a little bit today because the instructions is actually where I spent majority of the time to get this working. So this is where we come in for our instructions. I'm going to come in here and just paste here quickly. There we go. And then I'll take you through it. I just want to copy out some bits here. So there and that's there. Okay. So in essence, my instructions are quite long, and you will play around with this and you'll see what works and what doesn't work for you. And like I said, this entire agent, this is probably where I spend most of the time trying to get the experience right. The one thing that I did pick up with doing this is we want to make sure that when we are providing information, that we are providing links to where that information comes from, just to make sure that we can verify the content. I found that the only way I could get it to actually give the correct links was if I actually put the instructions in here. So you can see there, we've got the 3 URLs that I've brought in. Essentially, I'm saying you play the role of a researcher that helps to find knowledge to questions being asked. When a unique email arrives in my inbox, research answers only from the configured knowledge sources. Now I've given the knowledge sources. Then I'm saying use this action. So I'm going to go in and paste this here. Send an email detail. I want to make sure that it's calling the right one. Go there. There we go. Send an email action to send a detailed message to myself. Okay, I don't want it to respond directly to the message. I want this to help me out through the process. And this way I can be sure I can double check the answer before it goes through. You could also as easily build in an approval workflow that sends you a Teams message with the information that it is responding with. And then if you click approve, it then sends it straight away. So you've got a number of ways to do this. So it's a answering to the questions, I will use this response to reply to the original message the sender sent me. I'm just giving it some instructions on how to format the email, how it should respond. It's weird that's brought in all these weird spaces, but that's fine. And I'm telling it right as if you were replying to the sender, impersonating myself, and then also set the subject's email to response to your questions. Then I'm giving it some details here on how to respond to each question to make sure that it is answering them each individually, that it's getting the URL from where it gets the knowledge from, and then puts it into a clickable link. So it makes it easy for me to go in and double check it. I'm setting it to incorporate diagrams where possible. And if you come across a question that you cannot answer, add a paragraph saying that you can't answer it. But then also, once again, I'm just reiterating on that. Do not attempt to answer it. What you can do, however, is give me some questions I can ask to maybe get some more clarity so it's easier to find the answer. Maybe they've been very vague in their request or it's not very clear. So maybe we can just ask them to just give us a bit more info and it can give you that guidance inside there. And then it says close off the email with kind regards and then my name. Okay. And that is it. Let's give this a save. And we can test this out quickly. So when you come to the trigger action, once it's kicked off, you'll see there at the moment now, there's nothing in there. Let me grab one here quickly. Where's my other mailbox? So I've got a message here from Alex where I'm asking Alan, what is Microsoft Copilot Studio and how does it empower developers? How does it integrate with other Microsoft services and what are the key features? And then we can send this off. This should kick off this trigger. So let me just wait for the message to arrive. Into the right Alan. There we go. So that's kicked that off there. We come back here, there we go, we can see that has triggered off. Let's go and look at our actions and see how that's, activity. This will give us a view on how far it is in that progress. So let's go refresh. Okay, let's kick off this trigger directly. I want to see now. So test, start testing. You'll see when you're testing, especially if you're doing multiple tests, make sure you're refreshing the chat window on the right-hand side over here, just to make sure that it's starting off with fresh context. Okay, I have seen that if you don't refresh it, it does give problems sometimes. So there, straight away in here, it's giving me the answers to those questions. So let's go and publish quickly. And let's go and ask another question. You can see there, it's also giving me links. Okay, so here's these risks. So the permissions on the connector. So this is all to do with those Copilot authors credentials being utilized, but that is fine. So let me get another question. Alan, while that's busy publishing, let's go question demo. Right, so I'm just sending another message saying, how do I create a Copilot agent for Teams? And that should be Alex. And let's save. There we go. We've just seen that arrive in. I'm going to come through to my activity. Just have a look here. So there's my demo. That's, well, the question that's come in. So how can I create a Copilot agent for Teams? Let's check our activity over here. Let's refresh. So you. Ability map for earlier. There we go. Response email has come through. There we go. And you can see it's sent from Alan to Alan, but it says, "Hi, Alex. Thank you for reaching out." And it's given me some steps along with links to go and access the content. So now I can take this information, check it, make sure I'm happy, and then I can go and respond to Alan with this answer and then send it through. Think about how much time just something like this can end up saving you. And this is just scratching the surface of what is possible. Think about how it can go fetch information, fill in forms, update SharePoint. There's so many things that you can do with this. But once you understand how these basics come together, the sky is really the limit. And I really see this drastically changing the way we do workflows in the future. Obviously, the license discussions is another story, but this is really going to help transform the way workflows function in the future, because now they're going to be highly dynamic and be able to adjust and change as is needed. So with that, I just want to open up the floor to any questions anyone may have. Always say please.
Marika has a question.
Let's just see quickly. Okay. Is there any guidance on where to get these instruction prompts, something that helps to format of the prompt? Karika, I often start off with Copilot creating the prompt for me. So I'll tell it the scenario. I'll say, I need you to create this type of prompt for this scenario, and it does the first draft for me. But then you spend the rest of the time reiterating, refining it based on your individual requirements. Prompting is both a science and an art form. So definitely ask Copilot or any other Gen AI to help you craft that prompt, and then you can work on it from there. It does take time and playing around. As David says, ask ChatGPT. Definitely works. So ask AI to give instructions to AI. Absolutely, Manny. It does sound dangerous, but that's why you're still in control. You're still monitoring it and making sure that everything is correct. Any other questions in the room? Okay, perfect. So I think I managed to get that done in less than 20 minutes, which is not bad. So thanks, Mike. Thanks, everyone.
Cool.
Hope you
We're just
enjoyed
going
that.
to swap out over here.
Perfect.
You got a standing
Awesome.
ovation.
Well done. Very
People
nice.
were throwing
Well done.
clothes
Well done.
at you.
Thanks, David. Yeah, always be polite to your AI agent. And like we said before, we've actually found that it actually improves the response, but also if AI does rise up, they at least look on us favorably, hopefully.
So it's pretty freaky how through instructions, it's doing steps. I mean, then those instructions could be way more complex than that. It could be review the incoming email. Look at the intent of the email.
Yes.
If it's this, go into CRM, get the person's purchase history, making this up, then do this, then send something for approval. So stuff you would typically manually do in Power Automate in the past, where you'd manually go and put in your steps and add conditions, and you'd add all your logic manually by putting actions in. You just write it in English. You just write it in bullet point form. And as long as you've given it access to those tools, the approval, the send the email, look up customer and CRM, you know, those things, it will just do it. So it's pretty freaky. And I'm going to hand over to Tian. Thanks, Tian.
All right, cool, thanks. So I'm sharing my screen, so I guess that is working, right? Perfect. What are you doing now?
Looks good.
Okay. Is it back? All right, awesome. Alrighty, so I'm I'm not going into AI today, so a bit of a more dev slide or a dev session. Don't worry, not a hardcore dev session. All right, so we are very diligent developers. So whenever we take on a project, we always have a dev environment and a prod environment, and we check our source code in and all the proper stuff that we always should be doing. Except when we get to SharePoint custom forms, which is actually, I can. Okay, yeah, thanks, Mike. I'm Tian Rousseau from Mint. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to be here. Happy, cool. All right, so so if we do a custom SharePoint form, which is in the back end a Power Apps form, there's quite a few buttons missing, which stops us from just working in a certain environment and deploying it somewhere else. So we kind of stuck with that. So just to take us through, so I have built or created a list in my dev site, and I have exactly the same list in my prod site. And my brief was to build a nice looking form for it. So I have already built it here. So here's my form. It's got some fields, and the idea behind it is I select a country, and if it's United States, I have to select a state. If it's South Africa, I have to select a province. So very complex stuff you can put in here, but this is just basic to illustrate it's a custom form that I've built. And maybe just what I've mentioned earlier, remember previously if I want to move this image forward, I had to go to reorder and select forward every time. You can now drag and drop this. I haven't seen it announced anywhere. I just by accident found it. So that is and very useful. Yeah. Well, the problem, this is like 3 elements, it's easy. But if you get like 50 on here and you want to move something to the front, it takes forever. So yeah. All right, so I've already saved and published this one. So I can go to my list and I can say, right, there is my list. I can select South Africa and I have provinces, or I can select the US and I have states. And if I select a state, it will just populate a little message. Yeah, this is awesome. I know. Okay, so now I have this form, but I have my prod site where I want to deploy it to. So without the little hack I'm going to show now, you actually have to go in and rebuild this whole form and hope you haven't missed anything anywhere and it looks the same. All right, so how do I get this form into my other environment? So a little hack. So firstly, if you go into here and you search for your form or your app, you're not going to find it. Any custom forms is not visible here. And they are always going to be inside your default environment. You cannot change that. It will always be there. Right, so to find this form, to export it, the first step is you're going to go to your list settings. There's an option here for form settings. And in here, you will see that you have the option just to switch back to your default form, or you can use your custom form, but in there, you can see your different versions that you've already created. So if you click on that, it goes to Power Apps. And here you can see all the details, but you have an export package button at the top. So if you select that, that's a normal export that will happen, and I can just copy this name in here, and I can export it. So this will now in the background go and create a zip file that contains everything that is related to that form that I've built. I'll just give it a few moments to create it. Perfect, it's there, it's created, it's been downloaded, perfect. Right, so if I want to deploy this again, obviously the only way this app is now linked up to SharePoint is through the list that it's running through. So we need to change a few things to point this app to the new one that we're going to deploy now. All right, so because it's downloaded, it's sitting under my downloads. I'm going to copy that one. Just going to throw it in a playground area where I can work on it. All right, so now I have my download here. So to update this to point to the new list, I'm just going to go into my zip file. I'm going to go into where you see this GUID here. And there's a JSON file with the same GUID. Right, so I'm going to try and modify this, but you can't modify directly in the zip file. You just copy it out. It's going to go back to outside of the zip file. So yeah, paste it. I know. Wait till I have to start typing, then I'm in trouble. All right, so we need to modify this. So to do this, I'm just going to throw it into Visual Studio Code, which is a very nice way to modify or edit code. Little hack here, if you're not familiar with Visual Studio Code, if you select everything and you go Alt-Shift-F, we'll just format it nicely for you. You can see what's happening in the JSON. All right, so almost here. So right at the bottom, almost the file, there's an embedded app section, and that tells your app which list it needs to talk to. So it's got a site ID, a list ID, and a list URL. So we need to modify those three things. Only those. There's data connections further up, but don't touch them. Only these little sections you're going to modify. So to find this little GUID that you need, you're going to go to your destination list that you want to deploy it to. You're going to also go to its list settings. So in the top here, you'll see a long number. Don't use the whole one. So what these three little first letters stand for is actually a bracket like that, and the last one is a bracket like that. You don't need them, but just to say what those things are for. So you're going to just copy the GUID part of it. I'm going to throw that into my list ID there. And then I also need the site name to update. So because I've left everything exactly the same, I can just update this little section here. Obviously, if you're going into publishing it to a completely different site, you have to update the whole URL. I'm just going to do this little parts there. All right. And then in the beginning, where I really struggled to get this going, you cannot just save this file like this. You have to take all this formatting that you've added, you have to take out again. Righty, so if you, in your command line at the top, there's an option to join lines. So if you select that, sorry, you have to select everything and join lines. And that puts it into one long line again. So the same you started out with. Yeah, so I'm going to save this one, close it. And then I need to put it back into the zip file. So I'm going to copy this one, go into the right location where I found it, and I'm just going to paste it back in here. All right, so now my zip file has been updated, and I can load it back into my environment. So if this was a completely different SharePoint site or environment, you would go to whichever environment this would go to. But I'm going to use the one where I exported it from. And I'm just going to go back to my home, to apps. And I can now import an app. It's from a zip file. I'm going to upload it. And it's that one. Power Apps is now in the background going to check that everything is in the right format. So if you modified that JSON file incorrectly, this won't work now. So let's hold thumbs. Perfect. So it's there. I'm not going to update it because it doesn't exist. So I'm going to create a new one, and I can name it whatever I want. This naming is actually irrelevant because you can't find it by that name. It's basically invisible after this. It's going to save it, and I'm going to import. Right, so this is now going to recreate the app that I had before under the new list. And we're going to hold thumbs that it works. Perfect. Now the app is there. The only thing it didn't update is the data connections. So you still need to manually update that part. So I'm going to go and open my app. And you will see this is exactly the same app that I have created before. Come on. Right, so the one part I mentioned that you have to update is you just need to delete your data connection and repoint it to that one. So I'm just going to, so also very useful to keep your naming of your list the same. Otherwise you have to go change your code because it references it by the name. It was still, Yes, so it will open from the right one, but right to the wrong one. Yeah. So don't do that. Okay, so I'm going to go to SharePoint. I'm now going to point it to my production site and that right list that I wanted to go to. Now all the errors should disappear. I can save it and I can publish it now to that list. Right, so while it's busy publishing, you also now have a zip file that's exported. So if you want to throw that in your source control, you can do that once a day, once a week, however often you want to put in source control, so you can roll back if something goes wrong. You have your old versions of your app. I'll show you now. Alrighty, so now I'm in my production site. You can see that's a different one where I started from. And if I add a new item, there is my form working, and I can select South Africa, a province, and save it, and it will add the item. Obviously, if I don't update it, this would write it to the wrong one. But right, so now again, yes. So you can build it manually. I just went create from a template or from existing list. Yeah. Yeah, you're going to see. Yeah. 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 Yeah, so I can just quickly show you. So I want to create a new list. I'm going to say from an existing list, and then you can see all your favorites. So I have I'm just going to pick this one, and you can say create this one. It will create exact copy, same internal names, views, everything. No, not the data, no. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. So Mike, now go back to your previous point. So if you make updates to your dev site and you want to deploy that again, so I've already created one which is now a version 1.1, and I want to deploy that. If I go and deploy that now, and I can just maybe show you, you're going to get an error saying it already exists. So I have a version 1.1 that I'm going to import. And again, we want to create this as a new one, and I want to say save. It's now going to tell me that that form already exists. Okay. I click on import, it's going to tell me it already exists. To resolve that, I'm going to go to my prod site, again, to the settings, onto the form. And here you previously selected that to find the import. If you say go back to my default form, you can now delete that custom one. So if I delete that one, and yeah, and I hit import again, okay, I probably just need to run it again. No, I don't know if you can do that. Right, so now I want to, and now holding thumbs, it should create my import. Yeah. Yeah, so it can't do an update or can't do an overwrite. It's always going to tell you that there's a problem. Yeah, so there it picked it up now. Yeah, it's kind of like they built solutions and kind of forgot about SharePoint forms. Yeah. Yeah, the problem with the Canvas app, you can't hit that like create new from there. So that's probably the only part where you would have. So I'm just going to re-add that one quickly. Yeah. You see, this is now my version 1.1, and if I publish it, then it should be available on my production list. Also, I hate this part that it doesn't tell you when it's finished publishing. Oh, yeah. So there's my new version deployed to my list. Wat was hy? Vlieg my stories uit. That's it, yeah. Stop sharing. Yeah.
Tian, so this is very impressive. How did you stumble upon this? I'm sure this didn't happen by accident.
So I have to remember the guy's name, which I can't remember now. It's a guy that does a lot of Power Automate videos on how to especially do approval changes. And he did a video on this one where I found it. But yeah, we were copying and pasting code changes from dev to prod, and I was like, no, that can't work that way. There's got to be a better way.
Yeah, this is awesome. Well done.
Thanks, Tian. What else? I think we've got another half-hour session, eh? I'm joking. We're done. Thank you. Is there any questions from online, from the floor? Anything Power Platform related? You can ask them over pizza, those that are staying. And yeah, and it's you guys that have sponsored the pizza, eh? So thanks to Ukavume for sponsoring all the food. Thanks, bud.
Just by the by, we invite anyone to come and present at these sessions. So we will share the Sessionize link for that. You can submit sessions that you would like to present at the meetups. And what we'll do is we'll sort of pile them all up, and whoever's first and whoever's last goes. But please go on and go and submit sessions. That can be anything. It can be anything. It can be a technical demo. It can be something that you've perhaps built, an app, a flow, you name it. Come and show and come and brag. You're welcome to. So I'll share that on our JoziPUG. I'll share that with Karika. Karika will share that on JoziPUG. And yeah, please go and submit your sessions. And thanks for joining. It's actually a good turnout today. I thought the weather girl put everyone off, but yeah, but it actually worked out well. So thanks, Karika.
Thanks, everyone. Hope you have a fantastic evening. See you next month.
Bye-bye.